Hi, my name's Joseph Foley, and I'm a GCSE English student who has just finished reading and studying Great Expectations by Charles Dickens. When studying this book, the question that often arises is which one of Dickens' two alternate endings you wish to focus your interpretation or study on. And while the second ending is more widely studied at GCSE level, I'm going to be comparing it to the first to decipher which one I think delivers a more satisfying, cyclical, and more appropriate ending to the novel. So, firstly, how satisfying was the ending to me? As a reader, which ending did I enjoy most? I think this is important because when revising the ending of the novel, the success of the ending and its reception by its readers would have undoubtedly have been a factor influencing the one that Dickens chose. And in the end, I think in that regard, he did make the right decision in the second ending. The hesitant reunion between Pip and Estella was something that, for me, spoke of the themes of separation and eventual reconciliation that he had already seen play out with Magwitch and Joe in the novel, not to mention fulfilling Estella's character arc in a very emotional and fulfilling way to me, with her moral redemption seeming so aligned with Pip's own moral growth, bring a hopeful and uplifting ending, if slightly ambiguous, about their future together, which was very enjoyable to read. Dickens himself described his second ending, saying that I have put into this as pretty piece of writing as I could, and I think the word pretty really does sum up my thoughts of the ending of the novel entirely. It brings to mind a superficial beauty, a satisfying and enjoyable ending for the average reader, but one that, on closer look, is not really consistent in mood, tone, and perhaps in the social and moral ideas that have permeated the novel. George Bernard Shaw said that the novel is too serious a book to be a trivially happy one. Its beginning is unhappy, its middle is unhappy, and the conventional happy ending is an outrage on it. And this is a statement that I am inclined to agree with. Not only this, but I think the fact that after Pip growing and developing, and learning not to selfishly yearn after the wealth and upper class, and Estella as a symbol of that, it seems strange that after all of this development, at the end he seems to regress morally back into that unhealthy longing and desire. One extreme description that I've heard of the second ending is it being described as artistically indefensible, which I think, while being extreme, also contains some truth. While not being indefensible, I do think it is artistically questionable that he would change what is undoubtedly a great and classic piece of literature just to satisfy a popular audience with a conventional happy ending. Finally, I'd ask the question, is there a danger in using the second ending as the one that we study? I say this because Dickens would have planned, drafted, and wrote most of the book with the first ending in mind, and therefore I think that interpreting and studying and trying to infer meaning from the book through the lens of the second ending could result in some misinterpretation of things like foreshadowing or Dickens' intended themes. I asked the question, how differently would we view Estella? How much differently would I view the book if I had focused my study for GCSE on the first ending instead of the second? And therefore, I think for those reasons, I prefer the first ending to Dickens' more widely published second ending.
I think that ending one of Great Expectations is better. The tone just fits better with the rest of the novel, and it'd be wrong to make a full turn and allow the possibility for Estella and Pip to end up together. The second ending was written by Dickens to appease the public who weren't happy with the first ending. It is poetic and mysterious, and it continues extended metaphors, but it creates more questions than it answers, and I think it offers a dissatisfying and subjective conclusion to the novel. You could say that the continuation of the garden imagery and mists into the last chapter in the second ending means it is better written, but I disagree. It is a poetic ending, and as a standalone passage it would have a good effect, but with the build-up in the novel, with the constant depressive tone escalating, it would be wrong to allow Pip and Estella to be together at the end. It would betray the rest of the book. Great Expectations is depressive. You can't escape that. There are themes throughout of social mobility and not being able to escape the class you're in, which Pip struggles through. But fundamentally, it's not a happy book. There's not meant to be a happy ending. None of the characters are truly happy. The reason that Dickens wrote the second ending was to make people happy. He written an ending which satisfied his own mind, and he knew the novel best. The second ending was not a true ending, but just a crowd pleaser. If I'm honest, the second ending undermines the message of the book. Great Expectations is about more than the love story between Pip and Estella. It's about social change and discouraging people from aspiring to great riches because they could end up broken like Pip. Pip achieving Estella, who throughout the book has been a symbol of the upper class. He's reached the upper class. He's finally crossed that gate. He isn't an elemental character anymore because he's moved through. But it trivialises the message that the novel is trying to broadcast. Pip went through all of his pain, but for an end goal, which meant in some way it was all worth it. And that's the opposite of what Dickens is trying to say. Dickens is trying to save people from the eternal conflict of aspiring to riches with his didactic message, and the second ending just doesn't fit this. I think it's just unrealistic. Estella's conversion and abandonment of all her teachings from Miss Havisham would just not happen. One of the focuses in the novel is how ideals are drilled into you in youth, and again, this ending abandons that concept. It abandons too many concepts set up early on to function as a proper ending. This ending deals with the same idea, Estella being softened by her life past Pip, but not to the extent where she would say to Pip, God bless you, God forgive you, because these words mirror Jo's own words. She would never ever gain a heart. That's set up early on in the book when she tells Pip that she just can't love, that she can't feel sympathy. And when Miss Havisham says that she stole her heart away and put in its place ice, it doesn't make sense that she could develop a heart again. And to compare it to Jo, who's an angelic figure of good, Jo's set up as this angelic figure of good, and throughout the book he's a stock character, he stays the same, he's always fundamentally good and kind. And to have Estella use his words, to compare her to Jo, when she came from not having a heart in the slightest and is moving towards this figure, a biblical figure of good. It just doesn't make sense. It's a step too far. That's why I don't think the second ending really works.
Hi, I'm Daniel Reynolds, and today I will be arguing why Dickens's revised ending of Great Expectations is superior to the original ending. Although it may have been rewritten to please a discontent audience, I believe the revised ending is far worthier of being the true ending, predominantly due to the beautifully crafted cyclical structure that ties up all of the book's themes and motifs, and an ending far more suitable of a Bildungsroman. In the revised ending, Pip and Estella fittingly reunite where they first met, in the gardens of Satis House. Dickens's purposeful use of this setting, a nostalgic palimpsest imbued with all kinds of imagery, rather than the boring roadside in the original ending, allows Dickens to reconnect and tie up all of the motifs occurring throughout Pip's journey in an incredible cyclical structure, where the careful choice of Satis House as the new setting allows the re-emergence of these themes to flow naturally, rather than feeling like a retcon for the sake of tying up loose ends. As in the palimpsest of Satis House, it seems fated that the new motifs of mists, blacksmithing, the walls and gates of social class, and the reminiscent conversation between Pip and Estella all occur for the final time in the ultimatum of a nostalgic, sentimental setting, where so many past themes and memories have already been collapsed into it. In this ending, Dickens returns many old motifs, such as when faced by the gate of Satis House, symbolic of the entrance to the upper-class world, Dickens resolves Pip's repressing liminality when he finally refuses to wait at the gate and instead pushed it open and went in. Or a focus on the evening mists that were rising now, poignantly contrast against the morning mists when I first left the forge, where the juxtaposition of the morning and evening mists could symbolise the different chapters of his life, and as it is evening approaching night, Pip's story is now over. By using this new setting, Dickens artistically resolves the themes running throughout Pip's life, fittingly in a location where the memories of Miss Havisham and her past emotions, imagery of ancient fairy tales, and biblical allusions to the Garden of Eden now live on, along with the new motifs that Pip and Estella have now left behind after their final departing from Satis House. Furthermore, Throughout Pip's development, no matter how many times he has returned to Satis house, Pip could never find closure over Estella and Miss Havisham. Yet with their final meeting at Satis house, the last loose end of the book is closed as Pip and Estella's differences are absolved, with Pip finally obtaining closure. The original ending can't even compare to the magnitude of this skillfully crafted ending, wrapping up everything neatly, unlike the frayed original ending. In addition to this, I believe the revised ending to be far more suitable, considering that Great Expectations is a Bildungsroman depicting the growth of Pip throughout. Considering this, shouldn't the ending be the peak of this growth, with a characteristic event that epitomizes how far Pip has matured? Well, unfortunately, the original ending certainly doesn't deliver that, as in their final meeting, Pip is rejected by Estella for the last time, who has now remarried to a Shropshire doctor. And considering the novel is a Bildungsroman, this ending is incredibly discontenting, seeing how over the entire book, the relationship between Pip and Estella has only marginally changed. The revised ending, however, revels in accentuating how much they have both changed, and rather than having Estella bluntly say, "I am greatly changed" in the original, while nothing between them is any different from their first meeting, Dickens implicitly reveals in the revised ending Estella's newfound maturity through her use of language. She describes herself as bent and broken, but, I hope, into a better shape. Where Estella's first use of Joe and Pip's blacksmithing language, the common language and aesthetic that she used to despise, implies her newfound maturity and mental unity with Pip, which is a monumental development from her first appearance, fitting of the ending of a Bildungsroman. And perhaps the largest difference between the two endings is Pip and Estella's implied marriage in the revised ending, which is a final deviation from Estella's constant rejection of Pip. This moment is clearly the greatest display of their character development, finding unity together by breaking down Miss Havisham's cursed influence on them. So, I believe it should be clear that the revised ending is far superior, not because it was written to please a discontent audience, but because it perfectly brings all of the novel's threads together, and ultimately is deserved of a Bildungsroman, as unlike the former, it truly exhibits the incredible growth of Pip and Estella.